Hey everybody, I'm JJ. You're watching Reality Survival. Headed back north. Got the load dropped off. And now we're going back home to get another one. So, just want to take this opportunity while I'm cruising down the road here to talk a little bit about tariffs. Sort of the topic of the week with Donald Trump's big announcement on that he's going to impose tariffs across the board, and he's using it in an interesting way. If you look at the list of all the people, the countries that he's taxing at higher rates and stuff like that, it seems pretty clear to me that he is using this as a tool for the realignment that we were talking about in previous videos, right? He's using this as a big hammer to try to say to particular countries, the ones that are getting taxed higher on the higher tariff rates, that like, hey, you need to get in line. If you want to work with us, you need to pay attention here, or you're going to pay. And so that's an interesting use case for it. For those that don't know what tariffs are and how they work and all that kind of stuff, it's a tax that's imposed on the importing of goods when they come in the country. We used to use tariffs as the primary form of income for the government, a long time ago. And after the 1930s, the Smoot-Hawley Act, we kind of got away from that and the government, they didn't do it great back then either. They started to kind of do targeted industry tariffs and stuff. And ultimately, kind of the universal analysis after the fact is that, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was one of the leading indicators of why we went into the Depression. Back in the early 30s, late 29, whatever it was, that it made it worse, as well. And so the question now is that going to happen again? And we don't know. Nobody knows. That's why the markets are reacting the way that they are, and it's really going to be a let's wait and see thing. If we have enough leverage, which it's arguable that we do because we're the largest consumer on the planet. And so a lot of these countries are going to look at this and say, oh, we don't want to have to raise our prices by 40%, because some of these countries are getting taxed like 44%, so we'll renegotiate and we'll, lower the tariffs and all that kind of thing. And so we might see a situation where America comes out ahead, where we get a big economic boon from it, prices drop, and it may work out for the best for us. It's a huge gamble, though. It could go really, really wrong as well. It kind of just depends on how much of a backbone these other countries have. So we'll see. Politically speaking, I think there's a huge risk because and let me go back on the tariffs. So that they charge these other countries this money, but what that means is those countries just have to raise the prices, and then we end up paying it. So when you hear X amount of percent tariffs, 30-40% or whatever, I think on cars it's 25% across the board. That means that we're paying 25% more for cars here. That money doesn't just get paid by the foreign countries. That gets they just raise their prices. We end up paying it. So effectively, if it's like it stands, just if everything stays the same from what his announcement was, this has been a massive tax increase on the American people, and I'm not for that. I don't agree with that at all. Now, again, you can make the argument that he's playing 4D chess or whatever, and it seems that he's trying to do that, right? But you know, this turns into about $2,000 or so tax increase per person, you know, across the country. Now, he's talked about removing income taxes for everybody that makes less than $150,000 a year. I'll be interested. We'll see how this goes. I think he's going to need to hold on to that, keep that in his back pocket until the midterm elections. That is my guess as to what he's going to do, because there's a very strong possibility, at least in my assessment and probably others too, that if this doesn't work out well and and the markets don't react to it well and all that kind of thing, then we're probably going to face significant losses in the House and the Senate in the midterm election if this doesn't go right. And that'll be unfortunate because his agenda will be stopped cold. He won't be able to do, I mean, it'll be the definition of lame duck, right? Like he'll be done. And all the momentum of the good aspects of his agenda are going to be stopped. And I think that's a real possibility. I think it's a very real possibility that happens. Because the American electorate, just generally speaking, they're like it's like the markets. They don't like instability. They don't like uncertainty. They don't. It scares them when you start doing big, bold moves like this, you know, and you know, when they go to buy a new car and they see that they're paying, you know, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 more, or whatever it may, you know, turn out to be. The people aren't going to like that. You know, they're not going to react too well to it. And there's a lot of people who are in the middle, you know, looking at the parties going, I don't know which way I want to go here, you know, because we're going through that whole shift, right? Where the Republican Party is not, it's not even really the Republican Party anymore. I think that's a fair thing to say. It is more of the MAGA Party. And the MAGA Party actually kind of seems to be like the 1960s Democratic Party, maybe. Might be the closest thing that you could, you know, kind of put your finger on. You know, they're anti-war. They're for, you know, raising taxes. They're, what else? You know, culturally, they're a little more liberal than they used to be. They're not quite so socially conservative as the Republicans of like the 80s, you know, were, 70s and 80s and stuff. I mean, it's fairly similar, you know. They're environmentally friendly, you know. They're sort of progressive on technology, stuff like that. I mean, it's sort of like the 60s Democrats, you know, the JFK kind of Democrats. You know, pro-life. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the platforms are pretty similar, right? So we find ourselves in a strange situation, I think, ultimately. And I'm not sure that I belong to either of these parties. I find myself in the middle, kind of. and I've always been pretty independent, but I just don't know where all this stuff is going and how well it's going to work out. My sense of it all is that it's going to end up being a disaster. I generally speaking don't like tariffs. I would have rather, if he was going to do a tariff adjustment, I think just a reciprocal tariffs across the board would have been a smarter way to go about it. You know, say, hey, if you tax us 40%, we'll tax you 40%, you know, that kind of thing. That doesn't seem to be the plan. And again, I think it's because he's using it for his foreign policy and all that kind of stuff. And maybe history will prove that he was absolutely right, and that the buying power of the American populace is enough that we can make this work in our favor. It's just really risky. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens. I don't know. I mean, it definitely could lead to a pretty significant recession. I don't think it's anything we won't recover from, like we were saying before. I think that we'll make it through, but it's going to be interesting to watch. That's for sure. We'll see. Maybe the AI revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, quantum and all that kind of stuff. Maybe the rising tide of all that will help us stem off and lessen the recessionary effects. That's possible, because those changes in that regard are positive and moving in the right direction, I think, overall. When they roll out AI agents on a wide scale and they get better, that's going to probably boost a lot of aspects of the economy. Companies are going to become more efficient. Some people are going to lose more jobs probably, but there'll be more jobs created as well. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch all of this. My recommendation for you guys is that you really, really got to have your finances squared away. We talked about that in the last video. Look, just briefly. But the other thing is like, what's your backup plan? Do you have a primary source of income, a secondary source of income, a side hustle, a hobby, something that you can make money with, and then potentially even a tertiary source of income? What's the backup if your primary goes down? How are you going to shift? Are you going to move to your side hustle full time, or are you going to move something else? Like, start making some inroads and some plans, because the whole economy gets there's a lot of turmoil that's happening with all these realignments, with all these readjustments and layoffs and downsizing and all that kind of stuff, especially if we move into a recession, are very real possibilities that, like, a lot of people need to be ready for, especially if you're in a vulnerable sector, for whatever this is happening here. Sometimes, like what we saw in the Smoot-Hawley Act, was all the things that the anticipated outcomes weren't so well anticipated. The way that the markets reacted to certain things, certain tariffs and all that kind of stuff, wasn't what they thought it was going to be, and the downstream consequences of the enacting of those things was pretty rough on a lot of people. And so that could happen again. It's possible. So be ready for that, be preparing for that. Like this isn't, your traditional disaster preparedness, like with a hurricane or a tornado or something like that. The economic side of the house could be just as devastating for people, losing a job and everything like that. So you've got to prepare for those possibilities as well. Look at your industry, look at where you're working, try to, see if you think that it's going to be affected by the upcoming shifts in the market and everything, and then try to react accordingly and have some backup plans, have, some alternatives lined up. And obviously it just depends on your skills, what you're good at, what you can do, what you enjoy doing, and all those kind of things. But don't just assume that things are going to be the way that they are for the foreseeable future, because that is not where we are right now. Between now and 2030, the whole landscape of the U.S. economy, of the U.S. political system, like, it's all up in the air. Like, everything is on the table as far as change is concerned. And you got to understand that that's the environment we live in. We need to be really nimble in our ability to adapt. So I don't know what that means for you guys individually, but it's going to be interesting. I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of wading through all this change and all that kind of stuff, and got to be ready. So that's all I got. I can't think of anything else. Just jabbering, throwing my thoughts out there as I'm processing all this information and all that kind of stuff. Appreciate you guys coming along for the ride. You can go over to realitysurvival.substack.com if you want to get involved in our monthly prepper gear giveaways. This month's going to be EMP Shield Micro. Once I get back home, I'll try to get that post up and live. It's actually for last month. It's actually for March. I do the giveaways at the end of the month, so sometimes I run over into the next month. But yeah, that's where you can support the channel and all that kind of stuff, and I definitely appreciate it. I think we're going to start doing some subscriber-only live streams once a month as well here pretty soon, and maybe some other things. We'll see. Okay, that's it for me. Don't forget to live the 6 P's: proper prior preparation, prevents poor performance. Stay safe.